Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, it's a big one. We're going to be talking about the newest album from Nicki Minaj called Queen. I have never been one to give Nicki Minaj a free pass. Yes, even in the beginning, when she was one of the few women making serious moves in hip-hop's mainstream around the late 2000s, at the time with a ton of charisma and occasionally some really striking and colorful wordplay. Whatever you could say about Nicki Minaj, she had the charisma and the presence to be a provocateur and contender for the throne for women in hip-hop, at least in the mainstream. Sure, someone like me might point to the underground and rattle off the names of a half dozen different MCs to whom I would prefer to give that pedestal, and I have not been shy about pointing out my issues with Nicki Minaj even in the mainstream. The construction of her bars can get really slapdash and borderline lazy. Her pop pivots have been more misses than hits in my point of view, and she's proven more than willing than most to embrace a caricature of her image if it would ever give her any success, but very few of her fan base gave a damn about that or me. So long as they got the snapshots of genuine promise, they were able to tolerate her overlong and incredibly uneven albums. Not bad albums, but for every really good high moment, there were some really steep lows. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't last. The tidal wave from hungry and razor-sharp MCs from the underground was going bigger and bigger every year. And while Nicki Minaj was able to smack back Remy Ma, and both Iggy Azalea and Azalea Banks would mismanage their careers into the ground, the real challenger would prove to be Cardi B, who not only had more consistent bars and charisma, but also seized the chop-targeting success that had long eluded Nicki Minaj's biggest singles. And here's the thing. I wouldn't feel the need to bring up Cardi B at all if it wasn't so blatantly obvious that Nicki Minaj had internalized her as a serious threat in 2018, which led to so many of the baffling promotional missteps in the rollout of Queen, along with songs that made it clear that she was not even taking the mere presence of competition well. Like her fellow Young Money peer Drake, she had been shaken when truly challenged, and despite the protests of her Barbie fan base, it looked like it was kinda backfiring onto Queen, leading to critical opinions that were all over the damn map. And since I have never claimed to be a fan or a hater, I had the hopes this review would turn out okay. I have been hard on Nicki Minaj in the past, but that's because I've always seen volumes of tremendous potential for her as a star MC. So, alright, did Queen turn out alright? Man, this record is so frustrating because it should be so much better than it is. So, let's get out of the way now. In terms of sheer consistent rapping prowess, this is Nicki Minaj's best album released to date. Her flows are the most developed and complex that they have ever been, and Nicki Minaj has never been short on personality. The problem is that you need more than just bars and flows to make a good album, and Queen feels like the sort of overlong and overmanaged and overworked project where there is no clear vision or core. When it works at all, it works in fragments, and if Nicki Minaj is so adamant that it was her vision and that she had no ghostwriters, which, you know what, I'll go with because I don't want to touch the overloaded cavalcade of nonsense that's her relationships with Safari and Ransom, but I've got some serious questions surrounding the choices that she made here, most of which only seem to compromise what should be a better album. I mean, it's not terrible, but this should be good, and I'm not sure it is. And you know what? We have to talk about structure, because if we want to find the root of where Queen falls apart, it's in the foundations that can feel cracked across the board. Let's put aside the baffling decision of why Barbie Tings was cut from the main version of the album, and yet Rich Sex was left on. Not only does the former track fit with any themes and potential tone better, it's also markedly better than probably half the album. And then let's solely focus on her usage of guest stars for a moment. I already talked about the disaster that is Lil Wayne on Rich Sex on Billboard Breakdown, but the larger truth throughout her entire career is that Nicki Minaj is such a singular presence on a song that her presence suffocates any collaborator or she winds up sounding diminished. There's rarely any chemistry with the other artists, and that can only hurt songs as a whole. So on the one side, you get Lil Wayne and Future sounding either awful or utterly pointless on their respective cuts, or she's overshadowed by Ariana Grande on Bed, who delivers a much more convincing, sensuous hook, as I also already brought up in Billboard Breakdown. Hell, on Majesty we somehow get both situations, as Labyrinth might be a real non-presence on the hook, but then Eminem shows up with an overlong verse and yet bringing one of the most kinetic flows he's put out in years, and yet for some ungodly reason Nicki decided to add another verse of her own after his, and it's a glorified outro, really ends the song on a bum note. Or take out collaboration with The Weeknd on Thought I Knew You, where not only is the chemistry non-existent, it sounds like they recorded in different studios, possibly different continents. But somehow it gets even worse, with Sway Lee delivering his worst vocals since Swang on Chun Sway. And this isn't even touching the songs where Nicki Minaj herself is singing. Look, for as many names as you dropped, you couldn't get a hold of more pop acts in order to handle hooks. You dropped Katy Perry, where is she? You're not a bad singer, but it's not your strong suit. And then there's Coco Chanel with Foxy Brown, presumably here to prove that Nicki Minaj can indeed work with other women in hip-hop, but that's likely more because Foxy Brown's records were never all that good to begin with, and she doesn't exactly sound great here. Nicki is indeed showing her up. Now, you might think this record would sound overstuffed in all the ways I'm describing it here, and in a way it can feel like it because of Nicki Minaj's very in-your-face delivery without a lot of subtlety, but the truth is that there are 19 songs on a record running comfortably over an hour, and that's a shocking amount of wasted space in terms of extra tacked-on hooks, verses, and outros that can't help but feel really perfunctory. This is where a conversation of structure becomes really important, because there's no damn reason to tack on the Inspirations outro when you're just gonna reuse a lot of the production and flow of Coco Chanel. It didn't really need to be there. Or tack on the extra minute and a half on Ganja Burn if you're not gonna do anything interesting with it. And that song already has a problem with a hook that doesn't remotely connect with the sentiment or attitude coming off the verses. Hell, after the beat switch, I would have chopped off the rest of Barbie Dreams and at least 2 minutes off of Chun Sway, and that's before we talk about the pop and R&B concessions. Fewer than on previous albums, likely with the correct assumption that they're not needed in the mainstream anymore, but feeling now all the more out of place, especially as they don't nearly match the more aggressive framing on some of the other songs here. Take tracks like Run and Hide and Nip Tuck. They're not bad efforts in this territory, even if they sound like the sort of grainy, blocky clunkers that SZA could knock out in her sleep. But what sounds utterly out of place here is the interlude Too Lit Too Late. Yeah, I know it's just an interlude, but it's a sort of bubbly pop rap that someone like Kyle would perform, not Nicki Minaj. And following it with the ballad Come See About Me makes you wonder if this was only here for the pop rap Hail Mary single to get something charting if the rest flops. And the frustrating thing is that in comparison to other mid-tempo Nicki ballads she's put out over the past decade, it's probably one of the better ones thanks to the piano line and hook. I actually kind of like it. But this leads to the production conversation, and if there is an artist who so desperately needs some more consistent and colorful beats to match her style, it's Nicki Minaj. Maybe it's because her albums are trying to be so many things for too many people, so the sound is really all over the place, from contemporary R&B to pop rap to more tropical grooves to your by-the-numbers trap beats. But what bugs me is that the quality of the actual beats is not higher. A lot of the percussion sounds really cheap, and that few of any of these beats have real significant texture, which for as much as she's flexing about immense wealth, you would think the production would show off a little bit more opulence in order to back it up in the actual sound. And again, what's frustrating is that you can see snippets of what could have been here. I like the guitar sizzle lurking behind Ganja Burn. It is a good song. And if Nicki is about the only woman who could convincingly flip Biggie's Just Playin' Dreams guitar line, shame she had to tack on that pointless beat switch, but oh well. And while I have issues with the content of Chun-Li, who is not a bad guy no matter how much Nicki wants to spin it, and then repeat her own bars from that song just one track later about King Kong on LLC, I will say the production's really grown on me with the squonking horn groove and the gongs, and following just 2 songs later with the flashy synths and the darker trap bombast of Good Form, they show off some tones that could work effectively if Nicki wants to double down in that lane. Same with the steamy trap murk of Coco Chanel. But the songs like the dreary bore of Sir, or the warping bassy trap discordance of Miami or Chun Sway, or the auto-tune abuse of Hard White, they don't really have anything in their production that uniquely complements Nicki, or say this is a Nicki Minaj song or album. Yeah, she can handily step in and handle those styles. If there's one thing this album proves is that she's a good enough rapper to make a lot of styles work for her, but aside from sounding a bit more washed out and bigger. The production's not really all that exceptional or interesting, especially if you could give this to anybody else and you wouldn't care. But now we gotta get to the content. And look, I was not expecting anything close to the stabs at depth or emotional nuance that Nicki Minaj attempted on the Pink Print. And that's fine, because at least when it comes to these raps, they're gonna be vicious, over the top, and occasionally hilarious. And that can be all you need for this sort of album. I'll definitely say Barbie Dreams treads into some controversial territory in the jokes he makes about other MCs that could definitely read as punching down, especially about Young Thug and Designer. It doesn't make her look as tolerant as she tries to put on airs about. But given the context of the sample she's flipping and everything that they've said about women, including Biggie, I'm more inclined to give her a pass here. But right after that, we hit the curdled, cackling ugliness of rich sex and then hard white. Look, I've got nothing against Nicki Minaj using her sex appeal to sell albums, but it's a little bit contradictory when you say you never had to strip to get the pole position on the same song where she describes her own objectification as a trophy of the game. But even still, Nicki still has the weird problem that whenever she raps about sex, she never sounds like she's actually enjoying it. In fact, it's more like she's aggressively not enjoying it, because she doesn't even really play Disaffected well opposite The Weeknd on Thought I Knew You. And hell, most of the third verse on Bed is highlighting how the guy's actively getting it wrong. At least when Cupcake talks about sex, she sounds like she's having fun, but it leaves you wondering where the actual core of the album is. I'll say it again. And you know, I'd be inclined to say Nicki Minaj is asserting her ultimate bad girl dominance of women in hip-hop, and you know, for as hard as she's trying, I just wish I bought into it more. Part of it is how she relies way too heavily on the easy shortcut of just rhyming words to themselves in order to fill up space, but she also seems a little bit too comfortable and falling towards petty but deferential ditziness that at this stage of her career she doesn't really need to rely upon. If you're as loaded as you claim, why are you running off with a dude's credit cards, or are so willing to play dumb or call guys sir, or ratting on girls who sleep with guys without a lot of money when your own record of guys and relationship choices that you bring up don't reflect the best of choices either? And you know what? It would be different if it was building up to a deeper core of insight or any sorts of theme or showing off a lot of different sides of Nicki Minaj that all feel believable. But she confines any real introspection to her R&B songs, and it winds up feeling so shallow and thin when it really shouldn't. And here's the disappointing part. Queen probably shows Nicki Minaj as the most consistent MC she's ever been in terms of bars or punchlines, but if you're gonna stridently claim that you're on the throne with production that's not that special, increasingly slapdash construction that should be inexcusable for any major label act, somebody screwed up in promotion and organization here, and lyrical ideas that feel less reflective of a multi-talented artist than somebody who's managed to try to be everything to everybody and winds up not really satisfying anybody but the diehard fans, well, you're gonna get unseated off that throne. I'm sorry. But for me, it's a strong 5 out of 10, only really recommended to the fan base. And for everybody else, look, I wanted to like this. And while I have no expectations that this would be a contender for what Dessa or Jean Grae or Janelle Monáe are doing in R&B and hip-hop so much better right now, Nicki has always had the potential, if not the direction, to be an artist in that caliber and tier for me. I've always thought she's had the potential, and I'm really tired of getting disappointed for her not quite getting there for factors that might be in her control. And really on this record, she's asserting so much more of them are in her control, and that means there's less of an excuse. And at the end of the day, at least Cardi B sounds like she's having fun. I'll stick with that. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I don't know what to tell you folks, Barbies. Look, I wanted to like this. I think Nicki Minaj has a ton of potential. This is the best she's ever sounded in terms of pure bars and flows on the mic. But her production's not getting there, her guest stars are really not helping her, and a lot of the content just doesn't even have the introspection that the Pink Print had. This just feels sloppier and shallower, except when it goes for that shallow basis, it doesn't consistently stick the landing. I'm sorry. But yeah, you want to buy the record, links down there below, and the poll's up there for y'all to tell me how wrong I am, and I know a bunch of you will. Have fun. But till then, if there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process to support the channel, link to my Patreon's right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. Want to see a schedule to my Instagram, link down there below. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time. Beat my chest. Bitch, it's King Kong. Yes, it's King Kong. Bitch.